Guitar is a really difficult thing to sample properly, especially if it's heavy and low. And we went as low as you can go. This is a PRS guitar. It's called a Wood Library, so it's a pretty high-end guitar. The back of the neck is barely finished and it feels really great and smooth. It's an ebony neck and it's a 24 fret guitar. I actually hadn't owned a 24 fret guitar until like a year and a half ago. And so I started like learning some fun guitar solos and I'm like, I don't have 24 frets. And anytime I do a solo, this is the guitar I want to play. And this is my favorite guitar right now. It made its way onto Damaged Guitars for some of the like not super low stuff that was kind of metally. Like that. Next up we have what is called a Gibson Firebird. As I started watching every guitar player known to man. This is a guy named Joe Bonamassa who's an incredible blues player, and I saw him playing a Firebird and I had actually never seen one before. It was developed by a car designer and it has almost this sleek Cadillac long, it's a really large guitar. Like next to my PRS you can see the scale, but it has a really unique tone. Just sounds great. It's awesome. And this riff is a fun one because it uses an octaver and a bunch of distortion. Let me see if I can pull this off. Yes, Jackson guitar. Next, we get into the drop A stuff. Normally this guitar is tuned to B, below E, which is pretty low. And to make it heavier, because why not, it is Damaged Guitars, I dropped this to A to get really low, but not mushy. My first guitar that I got when I was, I think 15 or 16 is this guitar. This is like crazy serial number, like 1,000 from Jackson, and I played it. It's been everywhere. It was on tour with me. So I definitely have a love for Jackson as well. And this guitar is just so suited to this low heavy stuff. The way it was built to do that. It just sounds like crunchy, delicious metal. I'm a Slipknot fan, and this guitar is actually like the custom shop Jackson guitars for the guitarist, one of the guitarists, Mick Thomson. And that dude is like evilly talented. Like the stuff that he plays is insane. I had stopped playing for the most part for almost 25 years. I was writing music for TV and film and games and all that stuff. And when we built the new studio that we're in now, about 3 years ago, my older son that was also into like metal, my son Ryan, said, hey Dad, you know, this is the hardest Slipknot song according to YouTube to play. It's called Gematria. Can you play this? And I'm like, not yet. And so that sort of, he sparked me playing again, which is pretty amazing. It took me weeks to get the rust out, to get that right hand to be able to play. And I just couldn't believe how fast it was, you know, and eventually I got it, and then that sort of led to this whole passion of more playing and tone. All right, we have to talk about this guitar. It's an 8-string guitar. I'm only using like 3 or 4 of them, but the purpose was to go as low as humanly possible. I looked around, I listened to a bunch of them, and this is actually an Ernie Ball Majesty 8, which is John Petrucci, who is Dream Theater's guitarist, who's like a shred master of the universe. It's his line of guitars. So when I got the guitar, I plugged it into my setup and I was like, this doesn't sound tight enough. And I'm using this like custom boost pedal, which I'm not gonna show you. And I had to sort of flip it to a different mode and scoop out all this EQ. And then it like suddenly went, zhunk, perfect. And I recorded a few riffs and the guys came in and they were just like, what? You know, like it was just so heavy. I got so excited and just started coming up with riffs. A guitar like a Les Paul is a very heavy guitar, and that mass makes it sustain more. It just sounds giant. It's got to feel good in your hands, I think. And then the next thing, because people talk about tone, and it's in your fingers. A lot of it is in your fingers, like the way you bend a note, the way you hold a note, how hard you play, your vibrato. Like all those things are individualistic, like elements of your guitar personality, or you know how you play and your creativity on the instrument. You ready? I think I'm ready. This is a Fender Telecaster. I love this guitar, and it's one of the last ones, if not the last one I bought while we were doing damaged guitars. And I was looking for, it was the never-ending search for tone. So this is a custom shop, and I think it's like a 1951 replica built to the same spec. I wanted sort of the original, really vintage sounding, clean guitar. On this, it's a single coil and a single coil, and they have a very distinct sounds. Right now I'm on the front pickup, which is... If you go to the other pickup, it's really bright. You can, you know, roll off some tone. And it's really pretty. You can go in the center where you're using both pickups. There's a big difference between using a pick and using your thumb. It has many personalities. Like, that's the beauty of some of these vintage guitars. They have a sound to them right out of the box, and then you can sort of sculpt the tone. Pickup selection, using a pick, using your fingers, different amplifiers, pedals. It was a real surprise to me how much I loved this guitar. So this is another really great guitar, beautiful guitar that I bought. It's not any Strat. I actually owned 2 Strats before, and I sold them both to buy this. And it's also another Fender Custom Shop. The tone of this guitar when I got it compared to the other guitars that I had, it would just blew my mind. This sounds like what a great Strat should sound like. Great for clean stuff and also doing raunchy riffs. Reminds me, in the very beginning of me playing, I was 10. I think I was like learning Greensleeves, which, you know, is in like a guitar book, and it's like a really old song, and it's just boring, and no offense to the song. I hated it. So I got a new teacher, which like sort of led me more into the rock direction. And that sort of segued into finding friends in junior high that also played. I'd go to their house, and it was all Beatles all the time. We were learning Beatles songs. And then it was like, what is that? It was AC/DC. And that sort of moved into that 80s hair metal, like, you know, Dokken and Motley Crue, and, you know, like amazing guitar players, Warren DeMartini from Rat. Like, oh, I love that guy, he was so great. It was really exciting and fun to play that stuff. And then like sort of life went on. I am doing music, I don't care if I fail, I need to do this. So my parents were cool and they said, yeah, You can go to Berklee College of Music in Boston. I spent 4 years there, but I also was playing in bands around Boston. And I ended up in this incredible band called the Rick Berlin Band, who had some incredible musicians that you might have heard of. One is Jane Mangini, who plays with TSO, with Phil Bino, incredible bass player, still plays with Steve Vai. And like lastly, Mike Mangini, who played with Steve Vai, a million other records, and he's still the drummer with Dream Theater. If you don't know who they are, maybe you're living under a rock, I'm not sure. Mike taught me through just practicing with him so many incredible things from a drum perspective that helped my guitar playing. And then I got into a band, my first real band, called Annihilation. So I had to learn all these songs, and it was super fast metal and really like, you know, guitar like lead lines with rhythm, and it took me months to like really learn it and get it good where it sounded legit. We recorded a record with Max Norman, who had done the original 2 Ozzy records, at least one of them. So that was like being around royalty because he recorded Randy Rhoads. Album comes out, we start rehearsing for a tour in Europe. I think like the 3rd show we're in Holland, and it's this enormous festival called the Dynamo Festival. All this sort of underground metal and bands like Anthrax and Merciful Fate. We played the second day, but there was 90,000 people there. And it's surreal. I had so much adrenaline. You know, I'm like shaking and nervous and anxious and excited, but it's definitely the most memorable experience and exciting experience I think I had playing as a professional musician. It just was bonkers and really cool. And then there's sort of this morphing from being a touring guitarist into a media composer, and then moving to New York City and working in a big commercial advertising music house where we were working on like NFL, Gillette, GE, writing music, you know, for commercials. Then we went out on our own. This is Dave Frazier and myself. We went to Berklee together and started Heavyocity. We would use audio and sound design and sort of meld it together to sort of blur the line between, you know, what is music and sound design. That led to Dave having the idea of, we're always trying to find great sounds. We've gone through every library there is known to man. We could do this. We could do a better job at this. And I was like, okay. And that was the beginning of our first project, Evolve. At the same time that Evolve had started, I was like, hey, I'm a guitarist, let me do a guitar library, because there weren't any that were really good at the time. But back then, I was literally recording really heavy guitar riffs with the idea of releasing that as a product right after Evolve. But for a lot of reasons, the technology, sampling, getting good riffs to play back in an engine, just wasn't quite there. So we sort of just sailed on. This idea was always like this itch I needed to scratch. You know, as I was getting more into playing guitar again and solos and rhythm and tone and buying new guitars, I just sort of got obsessed. And I was really excited about new guitars and how they sounded. I already had a few guitar amps, buying new guitar amps. What do those sound like? And like sort of getting into tone. And then it was like, this is what we were doing 15 years ago. Let's do this. That was basically the beginnings of what is now Damaged Guitars. And the idea was like, okay, so how do you do a guitar library or a guitar product that sounds authentic? I wanted to take it from a different perspective, which was like, what's the most important ingredients in this thing? It's vibe, it's tone, it's heavy, it's clean. What will set it apart? Having the experience of being a professional guitarist in a former life and then sort of rediscovering it through my son saying, hey, can you play this crazy guitar, you know, rhythm part? I just wanted to attack it in a way where people could really go, let me listen to this loop, and it was like stereo, crunchy guitars played super tight, like EQ'd perfectly to sit in a mix. The best way forward was, let me treat this like I'm recording an album. So that was always in my mind, and I'm writing riffs and I'm thinking like, could this be on an album? Does this sound real? How is the tone? So I just spent months of recording, you know, it's emotional in a way that feels mysterious or scary or aggressive or badass or whatever it is. I wanted it all to be in there so people could say like, yes, this is like a go-to anchor that doesn't really exist out there in the world of virtual instruments. I've heard a lot of them, and you know, you can go in and sample every note and string moves, and then you gotta record that clean, and then you gotta go through like a guitar, you know, amp simulator, and it's not the same. It just doesn't sound the same as like sitting down and recording riffs like you're doing a record through amazing tube guitar amps, beautiful guitars, crazy amounts of pedals, and getting a great sound. And that was really what it was about. It was like the tone quest, the vibe quest, spreading out so it wasn't like pigeonholed into being crazy heavy. You know, it could be like esoteric and clean and beautiful, and then it could be ferociously heavy. And now we have damaged guitars. You get the idea. It's just super evil.